Around 800 BCE, a new civilization was rising across the Aegean world. Ancient Greece was born along the shores of the Aegean Sea. This land was filled with hundreds of islands and rugged mountains. This harsh geography made it difficult to form a single empire. Instead, independent city-states began to rise. Over time, these small settlements grew into powerful city-states. But the first great civilization of this region did not appear in Greece. It began on the island of Crete. With their powerful fleet, the Minoans controlled trade across the Aegean Sea. Around 1600 BCE, a massive disaster struck. The Aegean world, a huge volcano erupted on the island of Thera. The eruption did not only destroy Thera. Massive tsunami waves spread across the Aegean and moved toward the coasts of Crete. Ash and smoke darkened the sky. The sea rose, and many ports and settlements across the Aegean were heavily damaged. This disaster weakened the Minoan civilization. Trade networks collapsed, and the balance of power in the Aegean began to change. As the Minoan civilization weakened, a new power began to rise. On the Greek mainland, the Mycenaeans were stepping onto the stage of history. The Mycenaean civilization was known for its powerful and warrior culture. A new military power was rising on the Greek mainland. One of the most famous moments of the Trojan War was the duel between two great warriors. Achilles, the greatest Greek fighter, faced Hector, the Prince of Troy. Achilles was one of the most famous warriors of the Greek army. His courage and unmatched fighting skills turned him into a legendary hero. Hector was the Prince of Troy and the city's greatest defender. He stood on the battlefield to protect Troy from the Greek army. At last, the two great warriors faced each other. The duel outside the walls of Troy would become one of the most legendary moments of the war. After a fierce battle, Achilles gained the upper hand. Hector, the greatest defender of Troy, had fallen on the battlefield. The Trojan War did not end quickly. For years, the Greek army remained outside the massive walls of Troy. But the powerful walls of Troy could not be breached. As the war dragged on, both sides suffered heavy losses. As the war dragged on, the Greek commanders began searching for a new solution. Taking the city by force no longer seemed possible. The Greeks secretly began building a massive wooden horse. This unusual structure was part of a plan that would change the fate of the war. After years of war, the Greeks came up with a different plan. They built a massive wooden horse and left it outside the gates of Troy. The Trojans believed the giant horse was a symbol of victory. They pulled it inside the city, thinking the war was finally over. When night fell, the plan was revealed. Greek soldiers hidden inside the horse emerged and opened the city gates. Once the gates were opened, the Greek army entered the city. The final night of Troy had begun. That night, Troy fell. The once powerful city was consumed by war and fire. After the Trojan War, the Mycenaean world slowly began to weaken. Many cities were abandoned and the old order started to collapse. After the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization, the Greek world entered a long period of decline. Historians call this era the Greek Dark Age. After the Dark Age, the Greek world slowly began to recover. Small but independent city-states appeared. These cities were known as polis. One of these city-states was Sparta. Spartan society was built entirely around warfare. In Sparta, boys were taken from their families at a very young age. In Sparta, boys were taken from their families at a young age. They grew up in a harsh military training system, known as the AGA. This harsh training turned Spartan soldiers into extremely disciplined warriors. The Spartan army became one of the most feared military forces of the ancient world. But not all Greek cities were like Sparta. Athens followed a very different path. In Athens, politics, philosophy, and art began to flourish. The city soon became the cultural center of the Greek world. In Athens, citizens began to take part in government. Important decisions were discussed together by the people. Over time, this system became one of the earliest examples of democracy in history. Athens was also the birthplace of great thinkers. One of them was Socrates. Socrates encouraged people to think by asking questions. His ideas would later form the foundation of Western philosophy. One of Socrates' students was Plato. He founded one of the first great philosophical schools in Athens. One of Plato's students was Aristotle. He was interested not only in philosophy, but also in science. Through his studies of nature, logic, and knowledge, Aristotle became one of the most influential thinkers of the ancient world. Ancient Greece produced remarkable achievements not only in philosophy, but also in architecture. The Parthenon in Athens became one of the most magnificent structures of this civilization. Theater and the arts also flourished in ancient Greece. These works helped spread Greek culture across the Mediterranean world. Sports also played an important role in the Greek world. The Olympic Games and Olympia brought Greek city-states together. Ancient Greece left a profound legacy in human history. Its legacy still lives on in the foundations of the modern world. But one of the most mysterious stories from the Greek world was about a lost city. This story first appeared in the writings of the Greek philosopher Plato. Plato wrote that the name of this city was Atlantis. And this city was once one of the most powerful civilizations on Earth.